Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Varley Art Gallery's Lunch and Learn series, generously sponsored by the Varley-McKay Art Foundation. I'm Rachel. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Varley's Public Programs Coordinator and host for today's virtual event. For anyone needing ASL access, we have 2 interpreters with us today, and closed captioning has been turned on. As we begin today's program, I want to start with a land acknowledgement. So we begin today's program by acknowledging the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples and their commitment to stewardship of the land. We acknowledge the communities in Circle, the north, west, south, and eastern directions, and Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, Seneca, Chippewa, and the current treaty holders, Mississaugas of the Credit Peoples. We share the responsibility with the caretakers of this land to ensure the dish is never empty and to restore relationships that are based on peace, friendship, and trust. We are committed to reconciliation, partnership, and an enhanced understanding. Today, artist Karen Tam is here to discuss her exhibition, Karen Tam, With Wings Like Clouds Hung from the Sky, on now at the Varley Art Gallery. Karen Tam is a Tiohtià:ke, Montreal-based artist and curator whose research focuses on the construction and imaginations of cultures and communities. Through installations, she recreates Chinese restaurants, karaoke lounges, opium dens, curio shops, and other sites of cultural encounters. Since 2000, she has exhibited her work and participated in residencies in North America, Europe, and China, including Victoria and Albert Museum, He Jiangning Art Museum, and Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. Tam holds an MFA in sculpture from the School of Arts Institute of Chicago and a PhD in cultural studies from Goldsmiths, University of London. She is the adjunct curator at Griffin Art Projects and is a contributor to the Asia Collections Outside Asia, Questioning Artifacts, Cultures, and Identities in Museums publication edited by Eastside Carbon and Helen Wang, and to Alison Holmes' book, The Changing Landscape of China's Consumerism. Her work is in private, corporate, and museum collections in Canada, United States, and the United Kingdom. She is represented by Gallery Huey Charbonneau. I apologize for my pronunciation. Maybe Karen can correct that later. Today's talk is entitled Karen Tam, In Search of Li Nam. Please welcome artist Karen Tam.
Hi, everybody, and thank you, Rachel, for the introduction. And I also want to share my land acknowledgement and recognize that even though this event is on a virtual platform, I acknowledge the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, the protectors of the land and waters on which Jojega, Montreal, is located, and whose unceded ancestral land I am grateful to live and work on as a racialized non-Indigenous guest. So I'm just going to share my screen and get my slides up. Oops. Okay, so everyone can see this, I hope. So my heartfelt thanks first to Annie Claude and the Varley Art Gallery for inviting me to present this exhibition project, and to have worked with you and your colleagues over the past 2 years with all the obstacles that the pandemic has thrown our way has been an adventure. My thanks too to the Art Gallery of Greater Victoria and the artists who have generously lent their works for this project at the Varley. To Anik again, to your parents and your colleagues, the Varley-McKay House, Art Center, the Markham Museum, my friends and their friends for loaning me furniture and treasures from their homes to complete this installation. Also, my thanks always to my parents and to Mr. Lei Luk Chun for their support over many years. And finally, a shout out to Canada Council for the Arts for their continued support of my work. So in today's talk, I will share how this project got started and how it has evolved over the past 8 years. So with Wings Like Clouds Hung from the Sky is an installation exhibition that has expanded each time it is presented. So initially conceived in 2014 in response to an invitation by Lisa Baldessera to be part of the Convoluted Beauty in the company of Emily Carr exhibition she was curating at the then Mendel Art Gallery in Saskatoon. This project began as a much smaller installation entitled Flying Cormorant Studio for Lee Nam. It reimagines the studio of Lee Nam, a Chinese immigrant painter active in Victoria in the 1930s and who was friends with modernist painter Emily Carr. As a historical figure or artistic figure, little is known about him except through the journals of Carr and a 1933 article in the Chinese newspaper, the Chinese Times newspaper. By creating a space for Lee in the gallery, I aim to help redress absent or overlooked early racialized artists, their communities, and their stories in Canadian art historical discourses. So I ask who gets to be included, and maybe more importantly, who is excluded from Canadian art history, from Chinese art history. So this slide is just showing you the installation view of my installation as it was installed at the Mendel Art Gallery. So when I was invited to present a project, I started by just researching Lee Nam. Basically, I remembered reading in Emily Carr's journals, Hundreds and Thousands, where she wrote about a person called Lee Nam, and that he was a Chinese immigrant artist, and I was just fascinated. And so for the project, I wanted to just find out more about Lee Nam. So I looked through phone and city directories, reread Carr's journals, as well as papers written by Goethe Moray and Linda Mora. In addition, I looked at historical images of Chinese artists' studios and had conversations with Lei Luk Chun, a senior artist who has lived and worked in Montreal since the 1980s. So this installation that I ended up with, titled Flying Cormorant Studio, and the Chinese title is Lo Qi Fei. So I wanted to parallel the experiences of two immigrant artists to Canada, one from the past, so Lee Nam, and one of today, Mr. Lui. I'm interested with this work in the notions of citizenship and belonging, connection and lineage, so meaning like the passing down of knowledge or transmission of knowledge through art, through teaching. This installation also included reams of sketches and practice paintings by my mother, Yuan Yin La, who is a student of Mr. Lui. So the history of the Chinese in North America dates to the 19th century when the Chinese immigrants from Guangdong province in South China came to the US as laborers on the Transcontinental Railroad. And by the way, this is going to be a really short summary of the history of Chinese immigration to Canada. So the racism and anti-Chinese movements in America forced a number of Chinese to move to the eastern states, as well as travel north up the coast to British Columbia. The first of these men arrived in Victoria in 1858, with more coming directly from China the following year for the gold rush in the Fraser Valley. Victoria's Chinatown was the oldest in Canada, and for a period of 50 years until 1911 was the nation's largest. By 1910, Victoria Chinatown occupied 6 city blocks. So this is what you see on this map. And the community expanded to include stores, restaurants, laundries, theaters, churches, temples, and schools. The area of Chinatown included 2 blocks of Herald Street, 2 blocks of Fisgard Street, and 2 blocks of Old Cormorant Street. Now, when I looked through the phone and city directories in an attempt to trace Lee's address and to find the location of Lee Nam's studio or possibly his residence, listed as 556 Cormorant, which Emily Carr mentions, I found that from 1878 to 1935, this address was listed under various import-export companies, employment agency, retail business, and listed as residents of individuals. In some cases, Chinese individuals and families were simply listed as Oriental. And you can see down the column under Cormorant Street, there's many of the listings under Orientals. And so this actually, rather than their surnames, it reveals the prevalent racial attitudes of the period. And so my reference to this is just on the phone that you'll see in the exhibition is just putting in the tab, the Orientals. So just an image of Emily Carr in her studio and one of her paintings or sketches of trees. In the Daily Colonist of December 15th, 1932, there's an article about Emily Carr's plan for People's Gallery. And in it, she writes, or she mentions Lee Nam and perhaps meeting him for the first time. Sorry, this is in her, what you see in the image is the article, and what I'm going to read next is from her journals. So, quote, "A young Chinese who came to my door carrying a roll of paintings. He had heard about the exhibition, had come to show his work to me, beautiful watercolors done in Oriental style. He was very anxious to carry his work further. He had asked admittance to the arts and crafts sketching class and had been curtly refused because of his nationality. I invited him to show in place of the flower painter, and he hung a beautiful exhibit." So the next set of slides, oh, sorry. Okay. So what you see here are a few slides of the historical images I was looking at. Here is the studio of Cai Bak-se. One of his paintings is in the show. And also, I think I'm having trouble with, okay. Another 2 more images of artists in their studios. And the next set are just installation views of my project at the Mendel. I collaborated with my mother and with Loy Lok Chun, seen here in his Montreal studio, on this installation. As I mentioned, I wanted to, in a way, parallel the experiences of Li Nam and Mr. Loy. And I included works, the paintings that you see here in the back on the walls of Mr. Loy, after having conversations about his experiences coming to Canada. I invited him to produce a set of paintings of the Rockies, of his, because in our conversation he talked about them and asked him to paint them from his memory. And so that's what you see. Now, I also included some reproductions of old photographs from Mr. Loy. Here you see an image of two of his painting professors in art school, artists Pan Tin Sao and Wu Fuji, on Mount Wangshan, which is a recurring subject of poetry and Chinese ink painting. And I wanted to include this the images of the teachers to really start thinking about the transmission of knowledge and how the notion of learning art through copying, for example, or learning from a master. So some more images of the show, of the installation. And in the back here, you'll see a painting by Emily Carr, which is in the collection of the Mendel Art Gallery, that I was fortunate to incorporate into the installation as a reference to the painting exchange that Emily Carr and Li Nam had, which she wrote about in her journals. So I like to think, of course, at the time in 2014, not knowing too much about Li, I like to think that perhaps if he had gone back to China, there might be an Emily Carr in China, and perhaps, in Emily Carr's estate, that there might be a Li Nam. So in 2016 and 2017, I was invited to undertake a research residency with the Art Gallery of Greater Victoria. This would be in preparation for an expanded version of Flying Cormorant Studio. And part of this I did by delving into various archives and collections in Victoria, seeing what I could find out more, or what more I could find out about Li Nam. I also took the opportunity to do studio visits with local ink brush artists. And I spent time in Victoria's Chinatown and the building where Li Nam had held his exhibition in 1933. So the archives that I consulted included those of the AGGV, City of Victoria Archives, University of Victoria Libraries, and the Royal BC Archives, which the following slides are taken from. So what we know about Li Nam is from Carr's journal entries. So first, he put on an exhibition at 556 Cormorant Street and approached Carr with paintings, and was included in an exhibition at Carr's house in December 1932. Now, despite his rejection of his application to join the Island Arts and Crafts Society due to his race, Li's watercolor, Eagle, I highlighted it here. I don't know if it might be too small for you to see. So his watercolor Eagle, as well as two other works listed under the pastels black and white category, were included in the 1933 exhibition and catalog. Other facts: Li Nam was a bookkeeper and did brush paintings of birds and flowers, landscapes, and also did one of a female figure. So in Carr's journal, she mentions him between 1933 to 1935. So, and they would have known each other since possibly before 1932 and up until 1935. I wondered what happened to him after. Did he stay in Canada? return to China? Did he continue to paint and pursue exhibition opportunities? What happened to him? So in the exhibition at the AGGV, we were able to include a reproduction of a sketch in the Royal BC archives, which at the time of my research visit, so this was 2016, according to the website, it was a sketch attributed to both Li Nam and Carr. Now, in the years since 2017, the attribution has changed again to only Carr. And I wonder, can we be sure? As Carr wrote of her desire to learn Chinese painting, could this work possibly have been produced together by teacher, so Li, and student Carr? This reproduction is also at the Varley, so you can see for yourself the mark making. Just to show you here also other things that I discovered in the archives of the city of Victoria, a photograph taken in the 1960s of the building. Now, what I decided to do when I was in Victoria at the AGGV, because they have one of the largest collection, I believe, of Asian art, I had the opportunity to look through their collection and also include works by Chinese masters, as well as works by Emily Carr in my exhibition. And I leant towards, I selected a number of works from the Lingnan School, which is a style of modern painting from Guangdong province, originating in and around Guangzhou city in the 1900s to early 1950s. Lingnan is a region of Guangdong province that was home to many reformists and revolutionaries, including the three founders of the school, Chen Shuyan, so whose painting we see here, as well as the brothers Gof, and excuse my pronunciation because it might be Cantonese and sometimes maybe there's a bit of Toisanese accent. So, so the brothers are Go Kim-fu and Go Qi-feng, all of which their works are in the collection of the AGGV. So, so what I wanted to say, I'm just going to skip a little section. Okay, so the painting that you see here is also in the Varley show, and I wanted to include Chen Shuyan, not just because he was a founder of the Lingnan School, which had a huge impact and influence in modernist Chinese painting, but the fact that he had spent time in Victoria. He was sent by Dr. Sun Yat-sen from 1916 to 1921 to serve as the Secretary General of the Canadian branch of the Guomindang and editor of the New Republic newspaper. And I wondered, like, what was Chen's influence on local painting tradition? And did Li Nam and Chen ever work together, as Li would have been familiar with Chen's art practice and political career? So the next set of slides are just installation shots of the project at the AGGV. With wings like clouds hung from the sky, and the Chinese title is Dai Peng Jiao Zhen Ye, is an expanded version of the project at the Mendel. I was able, as I mentioned, to incorporate works from the AGGV collection, and also, so these are the artists that were in the show, whose work was in the show. And I also included works by local artists, source props and furniture from the AGGV collection, and also through Kijiji listings. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Cai Bak-se is considered one of the greatest Chinese artists of the 20th century. And he also happens to be my mother's favorite painter. So I took advantage of the opportunity to put her work that you see in this slide of a painting of goldfish and put it next to his. And also having an Emily Carr almost next to them both. By putting works by masters, like, quote unquote, as well as local artists together, I wanted to explore the idea of amateur and professional artist, whether it's contemporary or historical, and to question again the exclusion of artists and art forms in art histories. So let's see. So the next set of images are Mr. Lui as a young art student. And we were both really excited that the AGGV flew him over to Victoria for the opening. And I was excited because I think he's a fantastic artist. And he shows in China, but I don't think he shows very often in Canada. And I wanted more people to know and get familiar with his work. So within the installation exhibition is another installation called Like Raindrops Rolling Down New Paint. And it's a collaborative and participatory work. I collaborated with Mr. Lui and my mother to paint over 300 sketches of birds. So this is based on the Lee Nam Emily Carr sketch. And this image is some of the measly 20 that I contributed of the over 300. And I think, and I hope I asked Nick when they installed this work to hide mine in the middle of everything so people can't tell that my poor paintings. So here's some installation shots, and I guess you can see it behind me in my virtual background as well. An idea that people can walk through or walk underneath. And what was wonderful, I thought, was the HVAC ventilation systems in galleries created this slight movement in the sketches so that they move, like there's movement. I think it's beautiful. And then they're clipped to strings. So the HVAC system kind of makes them move, and the clips click. So there's these little click, click sounds. And I just think it's wonderful. So in thinking about how the tradition of copying masterpieces in Chinese art can be one method of learning, I created a workshop zone on the other side of the Flying Cormorant studio installation as a mirrored studio where visitors could paint their own chicken sketches after watching a video of Lui Lok-chun demonstrating how to paint Lee Nam's chickens. They could leave their sketch with their sketch, or they could leave the sketch behind to be hung and added to the growing installation. I was thinking then this way it could multiply and spread the knowledge of Lee as an artist and of his artwork. In addition, there were scheduled workshops with local artists, and there's one coming up at the Varley that Rachel could tell you more about after the presentation. The English and Chinese titles of the exhibition, with wings like clouds hung from the sky, and the Chinese is Dai Peng Zhao Zhen Ye, comes from one of the poems found carved by Chinese migrants on the walls of Angel Island Immigration Center in San Francisco Bay, where they were detained between 1910 and 1940. I'll just leave a few seconds for you to just read through. I made 12 portraits of Li Nam. And these portraits were based on immigration records and photographs of individuals whose name were Li Nam or variations of Li Nam that I found in the records held at the Library and Archives Canada. We don't know what Li Nam looked like. Without a photograph or portrait to make him visible in the gallery, I seek to give him a presence by showing what he might have looked like. This is just an example of one of these records. Carr's descriptions of Lee's studio provided the details to flesh out the installation, especially the entry of December 30th, 1934, where she recounts his place in Chinatown as neat surroundings with Chinese books, pictures, flowers, a bowl of goldfish, a photo of a Chinese girl, and atop an organ are a Chinese calendar, various photos, and an abacus. And as traditional Chinese painter studios were mostly situated within the artist's household, it's likely that Li Nam also painted where he lived. Gerta Murray has suggested in her text on Li Nam and Emily Carr that Li may have had some influence on Carr's artistic development, the treatment of the brushstrokes, for example, and the use of gasoline to thin the paint after 1932, 1933. I just wanted to show you some of the albums, a set of books that my parents collaborated together on, where my father sewed together practice sketches that my mom painted and discarded and which I saved. So in thinking about connections and lineages, I mentioned I'd invited local artists, Kalisa Wong, Richard Wong, Li Fu, and Andy Liu, who is the son of Liu Shibai, whose work is in the AGG collection, and of course, Mr. Liu and my mother, Yuanyin Ma. I want to examine the experience of immigrant artists in Canada, their sites of artistic production, their reception and contribution to Canadian and Chinese art histories, and to connect Lee's painting studio with the lineages and kinships among Chinese, Hong Kong, Taiwanese, and Canadian inkbrush artists. So the next set of slides I'm going to show you are from the Richmond Art Gallery. And so I was invited again to do a research residency in 2019. And this project has evolved with each presentation where actually new knowledge has been uncovered about Li Nam. And each time I'm reminded about the exciting networks of inkbrush painters and how their work circulates. I'm still learning about it and the amazing connections that I've made through these community networks. So again, I went and met local inkbrush artists in their and visited their studios. Also, reached out to different museums and collections. So the installation views of the presentation in Richmond. Curator and artist Zhang Shentian's and his colleagues' research at this time turned up more details about Li Nam. They found in the Chinese Times newspaper, which everyone can access at the Simon Fraser University libraries, and they found this article about Lee's exhibition, and it confirms Emily Carr's journal entries. And coincidentally, Mr. Zhang knows Mr. Lui because they were either classmates or that they overlapped at the China Academy of Fine Arts in Hangzhou. And they didn't know, like they had been out of touch for a very long time. So I was quite excited to learn that. So according to this article, Li Nam's full Chinese name is Lei Jiu Nam. And according to the article, he was from Toisan and had studied poetry and literature along with painting at the youth. He held a 2-week solo exhibition of his paintings and life sketches made during his spare time from work, and that he welcomed both Chinese and Western visitors. And because of this new information, I asked Mr. Lui and my mom to make a new seal chop with Lei Jiu Nam's full name. I had made a set of 5 seal with Mr. Lui and my mother of Li Nam, as well as his studio, or I gave his studio a name of Flying Cormorant Studio. So I'm going to try to play this video of the participatory installation, and hopefully, yes, it works. Oops, sorry. So in the Richmond iteration of the show, as I mentioned, I invited local artists. So I put their names here: Sheila Chow, Ming Young, Anna Wong, Feng Shude and her parents, Lao Feng, Lu Feng. There's also Harry Yu, Jeannie Lee, and Ping Ma. I also included works from Kalisa Wang from Victoria because I wanted to sort of have that continuation of this show and of this whole idea of lineage and kinship. I'm sorry, I think I'm having trouble with the screen sharing. It's not really responding. So what's exciting that there's a new update that last summer, someone out of the blue sent me an email, an image of a painting that she had bought 25 years ago from a garage sale. And this is in BC. And she suspected that it was the same Li Nam I've been searching for. As you can see, it depicts a bird, and I guess you can't see it too well, but in the bottom right-hand corner, it's signed Li Nam and dated September 25th, 1933, corresponding to the same time that he held the exhibition in Chinatown. I share this info with my colleagues and with the curators I've worked with on this project since 2014, and everyone was excited about this new development. And Nick and the Varley and I had hoped that we could include this piece in this last stop of the exhibition tour, but due to several factors, we unfortunately weren't able to. But it's currently in the process of being authenticated and will be included in the forthcoming publication of this exhibition. Mr. Zhang and his colleagues have also since then done more research in the Chinese Times and found several articles about Lei Jiunam, who we suspect is the same Li Nam that the show is about. So just several things from it where there was a branch of the Chinese Nationalist Party or its affiliate in the 1920s in Cranbrook, and possibly that was the Li Nam. Also that he was one of the directors of the Freemasons, the Chinese Freemasons in Kamloops in the 1940s. So Li Nam possibly lived in Kamloops after Victoria. So finally, I get to the section on the Varley, and again, I wanted to do, and Nick invited me to come do research residency, but I think everyone knows, everyone's experienced what the pandemic has thrown at us, and so we had to adapt. And so one of the things I was a bit bummed out about was that I wasn't able to visit studios in person. But I had help from the gallery, from Nick and from Xiao Jingyan to connect with a few local artists, Soisan Guan, Peter Law, Meng Bao Qing, whose works are in the show. The other thing that I've had to do, well, not had to, but I started doing since the pandemic was making SketchUp models of the installations that I'm presenting as a way to help, say, the gallery and their tech team visualize the installation and how they might need to, like, works, the placement of works and where they're hung. In the case that I'm not able to come and do a install in person, which was the case here. And I'm super grateful to Nick and the amazing work and care that her and her team has put into making the installation come to life in Markham. So for the presentation in Markham, the installation includes works by Frederick Varley, as well as two of his students, Vera Weatherby and Philip Surrey. Between 1926 and 1936, Varley lived in Vancouver, practicing and teaching art. He knew Emily Carr and even invited her to one of his classes when she visited Vancouver. The works by Varley that are on display now at the gallery reflect his depiction of the British Columbia landscape, as well as his affinity with Chinese art. One of the things that Varley did was to get his students to sketch and paint their surroundings, including Chinatown. There is a small selection of books on the bookcase in the installation that I put together based on Varley's library of Chinese art and painting, and Buddhism at his Lynn Valley studio and residence. There are also books from the Varley Art Gallery's library itself of Chinese art and books on and by Emily Carr. So a painting by Vera Weatherby. And then the next set of slides are some of the works in the show by Markham and Scarborough artists that you'll see in the show. So we get the part where I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, but then share again to show you a video I took of the Matterport model that I did a walkthrough.
Maybe as participants view this video, they can start thinking about some questions they might have for Karen Tam, as we will be opening up the question and answer period in a few minutes.
Yeah, and I'll just finish up while this video is playing. So with Wings Like Clouds Hung from the Sky is a record of Lei Jiunam, his friendship with Emily Carr, and the shared sense of exile, whether cultural, political, or social. It relies in part on Carr's descriptions of Lee's studio and acknowledges this space as a site of resistance. By entering the artist's studio, one encounters the artist and the prejudices he faced. In an attempt to give presence to Lee Nam and make him visible, this installation exhibition incorporates elements of a typical Chinese painter's studio, as sketched by Lee and Carr right there, and other Chinese historical artworks in the AGGB collection, works by local inkbrush artists, portrait drawings of Lee Nam, based on head tax records of immigrants coming into Canada with similar names, a participatory painting installation, a set of carved seal chops, and a workshop zone to engage visitors to contribute to the exhibition. My installation suggests a potential for inclusion, and by placing Lei Jiunam, the work of Loi Lok-chun and other diasporic inkbrush painters within a gallery or museum setting, which is representative of official or canonical culture, this plays a part in redressing the absence of or overlooked early racialized artists, their communities, and their stories in Canadian art historical discourses. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much, Rogue and Jessica, for your translation.
Thank you, Karen Tam. That was amazing. The presentation itself was beautiful, your slide deck. This has been an amazing opportunity for us. Thank you for joining. I'd like to take this opportunity again to thank the Varley-McKay Art Foundation, as well as the Canada Council for the Arts for their support of Karen Tam's exhibition at the Varley. So I think we'd like to open up the question and answer time. If anybody has questions for Karen, now is the time to share, to ask. We'll just give them a minute.
I have to say, I'm looking forward to coming in April to see the space myself, because it's great to have this Matterport model to kind of do a walkthrough, and I just think, wow, it'll be amazing. I hope it's amazing.
It is. It's one of the most beautiful exhibitions I've seen here at the Varley, and we've received really great feedback. And also, in addition to this exhibition, we've hosted the Chinese inkbrush painting workshop with Mr. Guan, one of the artists you featured in the shows. It was amazing. We got great feedback from participants, and we will be offering another one in March with Peter Law. If you want more information, you can visit Eventbrite and search Varley Art Gallery, or of course visit markham.ca. So we have a couple of questions for you, Karen. The first one.
Timing, sorry, that was perfect timing because the video just ended.
Perfect, yeah. Okay, so we have a question. Will there be another version of this show elsewhere?
I'm not sure. That would be wonderful, because then maybe we can include this Lee Nam, newly discovered Lee Nam painting. So if anyone has suggestions, I'm open. Great.
We have another question. Although the goal of this exhibition is to imagine spaces that Lee Nam would have occupied, is a true retrospective a goal for this project?
Thanks, Liz, for your question. When you say retrospective, do you mean like a Lee Nam retrospective? Because I guess in a way, not necessarily. I think one of the goals was to find more information, maybe even locate works by Lee Nam. And then I guess once we're there, then maybe a retrospective. But really the goal of this project is just to highlight Lee Nam and to question who gets to be included in art historical discourse.
Good question. We have one more coming in. Do you plan to add more brush paintings to the ceiling display?
Yes. So at the gallery, and maybe Rachel or Enik could answer this, was the idea is that in the workshop zone, so in the video where you saw sort of the more empty space, the white cube section, that there's a table, chairs, and that the rice paper and these brush markers would be provided for visitors to come and take part and paint their own chicken or birds. And then they could leave them behind on the shelving unit that later on, I guess the Varley team would help hang up. So there's actually a lot of the strings that are empty and they're waiting for people to come and add to it.
I will say we have March break programming starting soon, and our campers who attend our camps will be participating in this activity. Fantastic. So I'm looking forward to adding to that from our programs.
What I've also done was I made rubber stamp versions of the seal chops. So then once people finish painting, that they can sort of put the seal chop on as a Lee Nam or studio of Lee Nam.
We have a great question. Do you feel a certain communion or dialogue with Lee Nam across time and space? What is it about this search for him that feeds your own art making?
Thanks for the question. And for sure, I feel an affinity with Lee Nam as a racialized artist, and to think about the his experiences and how much prejudice that he faced or challenges that he's faced, and I guess the search for him definitely feeds my own art practice. I've actually learned a lot and kind of applied some of the processes that I research methods in my other projects. So like a lot of my projects are research based and delve a lot into archives, historical collections, as well as community and collaborations. So yeah.
The question and answer period is still open. We can take a couple more if there are any participants who would like to ask Karen Tam any questions.
Oh, since I'm not reading my notes, I'm going to stand up in the space as if I'm actually here.
I love that. Since you can't be here in person, we're excited that you can stand in the virtual space.
I took a screenshot of the Matterport model, like several shots that I could pose and pretend that I'm giving a tour.
Walk around through. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions coming in. So I will thank you once again, Karen Tam, for joining us today for our Lunch and Learn. Thank you, our
Thanks
ASL
so much
translators.
for having me and everyone on the team at the Varley. Thank you.
And enjoy your day, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.